Mil tried to sabotage my $5,000 wedding dress, so I exposed her Felony to 60 of her richest friends. I was standing at the front of the country club ballroom, bathed in the soft, romantic glow of dim chandeliers, when the massive projector screen behind me abruptly cut from a montage of childhood photos to a raw, high-definition security camera feed. The rhythmic clinking of crystal champagne flutes completely stopped, replaced by a suffocating, dead silence as my mother-in-law's screeching, distorted voice echoed through the venue's surround sound speakers, demanding that a tailor permanently disfigure my custom wedding gown so I would look like a bursting sausage at the altar. My name is Rebecca. I am a 29-year-old digital strategist and UI/UX designer for a major global tech firm. My entire professional existence revolves around anticipating human behavior, identifying systemic flaws, and engineering flawless, foolproof user experiences. I spend my days building wireframes, conducting stress tests, and eliminating digital bugs before they can crash a system. I view the physical world through the exact same analytical lens. If a system is broken, I fix it. If a variable is toxic, I isolate and remove it. Unfortunately, for the last 2 years, the most toxic variable in my life has been my future mother-in-law, Beatrice. Beatrice is the terrifying, iron-fisted matriarch of an old money, aggressively wealthy family that prides itself on a legacy of lean, athletic, country club perfection. They are a family of marathon runners, competitive rowers, and people who consider a single carbohydrate to be a moral failing. She possesses platinum blonde hair so heavily sprayed it looks like a tactical helmet, and she perpetually radiates the suffocating scent of expensive gin and vintage Chanel perfume. From the exact moment my fiancé, David, introduced us, Beatrice viewed my very existence as a catastrophic insult to her bloodline. I am not a size 0. I do not have the hollowed-out cheekbones of a runway model. I am proudly, undeniably curvy, and to Beatrice, my silhouette was a personal, intentional affront to her family's carefully curated aesthetic. Throughout the entire 18-month engagement, she treated my body like a public construction project that desperately needed her architectural intervention. She disguised her vicious, sociopathic cruelty as maternal helpfulness. You know, Rebecca, Beatrice hissed, leaning aggressively across the crisp white linen tablecloth during our engagement dinner, her eyes scanning my plate. My grandmother always swore by rigorous corset training for girls with your heavier constitution. It's really not too late to compress that silhouette into something slightly more elegant for the photographs. We have an image to maintain. I felt the heat rising in my neck and my vision actually went blurry with a terrifying, blinding rage. I looked at David, waiting for him to defend me, but David just awkwardly cleared his throat and took a sip of his water. He had been conditioned since birth to entirely ignore his mother's barbed wire tongue. He thought she was just eccentric. I knew she was a predator. Because of Beatrice's relentless, grinding psychological warfare regarding my body, my wedding dress became my absolute obsession. I refused to walk into a standard bridal boutique and let a stranger compress me into a generic, mass-produced tool nightmare. I am a designer. I demanded absolute, structural perfection. I spent 18 months collaborating with a brilliant, reclusive artisan tailor named Maria. Maria operated a tiny, unmarked, high-end bespoke studio downtown. Together, we engineered the Starlight gown. It was a $5,000 masterpiece of structural integrity and flowing elegance. We used 100% pure, bias-cut mulberry silk, overlaid with imported French alasal lace that was meticulously hand-stitched to follow the exact, mathematical curves of my body. It featured hidden, flexible structural boning designed specifically to support my shape, not suffocate it. It was, without exaggeration, the most beautiful garment I had ever seen. It made me feel invincible. Last Tuesday, the timeline of my meticulously planned wedding week violently derailed. I was entirely consumed by a brutal, 3-hour final walkthrough with my floral designer on the other side of the city. My apartment was empty. David was at his office, but Beatrice had an emergency spare key to our apartment, a boundary-stomping concession David had granted her years ago under the guise of watering the plants while we traveled. I returned home just after 4 p.m. The moment I unlocked the deadbolt and pushed the heavy wooden door open, the atmospheric pressure in the apartment felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy, and saturated with the unmistakable, lingering stench of Chanel No. 5. My pulse began to hammer a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. I dropped my keys onto the kitchen island and walked directly into the master bedroom. I marched straight to the back of my walk-in closet, where the heavy, opaque, breathable cotton garment bag holding the Starlight gown hung from a reinforced hook. The zipper, which I always left exactly at the bottom seam, was resting 2 inches from the top. My hands began to violently tremble. I reached out, pinched the cold metal zipper, and dragged it downward. The silk was there. The gown was hanging on its padded velvet hanger. Nothing looked physically torn or visibly destroyed, but my UI/UX UX brain instantly flagged a massive, terrifying anomaly. The way the heavy silk draped against the bottom of the bag was entirely wrong. It had been moved. It had been handled. I didn't call David. I didn't scream. I went into total, freezing, analytical lockdown. I am deeply, obsessively paranoid about the structural integrity of high-end fabrics. Whenever I receive a physical prototype of a product, or in this case, a $5,000 silk gown, I utilize a high-powered, industrial UV blacklight flashlight to rigorously inspect the material for microscopic lint, hidden stains, or invisible manufacturing imperfections. I waited 3 agonizing days. I needed to be absolutely, perfectly calm. On Friday night, while David was at his bachelor party, I locked the bedroom door. I turned off every single light in the apartment. I pulled the heavy curtains entirely shut, plunging the room into pitch-black darkness. I unzipped the garment bag, pulled the heavy silk gown out, and laid it perfectly flat across the center of my king-sized mattress. I clicked the heavy button on the base of the metal flashlight. A brilliant, pulsing beam of violet light cut through the darkness. I slowly scanned the sweeping hemline. Nothing. I scanned the delicate, hand-stitched lace on the sleeves. Nothing. Then, I moved the violet beam of light directly over the inner structural bodice, right near the hidden zipper on the left ribcage. My breath caught sharply in my throat. A freezing, heavy stone dropped straight into the bottom of my stomach. There, glowing in a brilliant, blinding, neon green luminescence against the dark silk, were words hand-stitched directly into the lining using a specialized, UV-reactive invisible thread. The glowing letters read, "Locked, check the cloud." Below the glowing text, stitched with the exact same invisible, UV-reactive thread, was a flawless, geometric square. It was a functional, hand-sewn QR code, hidden directly underneath the designer's label. That's when the real bombshell dropped. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped the device onto the floorboards. I opened my camera application and held the lens directly over the glowing, neon green geometric pattern. The camera software instantly recognized the code. A small, yellow link populated at the top of my screen, pointing to a secure, encrypted cloud storage server. I tapped the link. The screen went black for exactly 2 seconds as the server buffered, and then a crystal clear, high-definition video file began to play. The camera angle was high, looking down from the corner of a meticulously organized tailor's workshop. And there, standing in the center of the room, was Beatrice. My eyes widened in absolute, unadulterated shock. I recognized the exposed brick walls. I recognized the heavy mahogany cutting tables. It was Maria's workshop. Beatrice had stolen my wedding dress out of my closet, shoved it into the back of her Mercedes SUV, and aggressively driven it to a local, high-end bespoke tailor to initiate an unauthorized, catastrophic alteration. But in her blind, arrogant rush, she had simply Googled luxury bespoke tailors downtown and unknowingly walked into the exact same artisan workshop where the dress had been painstakingly constructed. Maria, the brilliant, fiercely loyal tailor who had spent 18 months measuring my body and building this masterpiece, immediately recognized her own hand-stitched alasa lace the second Beatrice unzipped the bag. But Maria didn't argue. Maria didn't kick her out. Maria recognized a hostile threat, quietly activated the high-definition security camera mounted above her register, and played the part of the subservient, money-hungry seamstress flawlessly. I sat alone in the dark of my bedroom, the violet light from the flashlight casting eerie shadows across the walls, and watched my mother-in-law commit a literal felony. "I need this taken in by exactly 3 inches at the waist and the bust line," Beatrice commanded on the video, her grating voice captured flawlessly by the omnidirectional microphone. She reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a thick stack of crisp, $100 bills, and slammed them aggressively onto the cutting table. "Here is a $1,000 rush fee. I need it done in 24 hours, and I need it completely indistinguishable from the original seams." Maria stood perfectly still on the footage, looking from the money to Beatrice's deeply smug face. 3 inches is a massive structural reduction, ma'am. The bride will not be able to zip the garment. It will restrict her lung capacity. "That is exactly the point," Beatrice hissed, a dark, venomous smile spreading across her heavily Botoxed face. "I want her to look like a bursting sausage. Make it so tight she has to apologize for her size in front of everyone. If she can't breathe, she can't eat the cake. It's for her own good. When she inevitably splits the zipper in the bridal suite, I will conveniently have a vintage, size 001 backup dress waiting for her. She will be forced to wear it, or she won't walk down the aisle." I watched Maria slowly nod her head, sweeping the stack of $100 bills into her apron pocket. "I understand completely, ma'am. Come back tomorrow at 3 o'clock. It will be exactly as you requested. The video ended, fading to a black screen. Beatrice hadn't just insulted me. She had orchestrated a deeply malicious, premeditated psychological strike. She intended to humiliate me on the most important day of my life, physically trap me in a garment that was intentionally modified to cause me bodily pain, and force me to parade in front of her high society friends looking like a failure. Maria, executing a masterclass in malicious compliance, didn't touch a single structural seam of the dress. She kept the $1,000 bribe as a convenience fee, used her precision embroidery machine to stitch the UV reactive warning label into the lining, and handed the completely unaltered dress back to a deeply arrogant, clueless Beatrice the very next day. Beatrice then used her emergency key to sneak the dress back into my closet, firmly believing she had successfully planted a ticking time bomb. She had no idea she had just handed a loaded, digital shotgun to a UI/UX developer. I didn't call the police. The police would just issue a simple trespassing citation. The police wouldn't inflict the necessary, permanent social annihilation required to fix this bug in my life's software. I didn't even confront David. I needed him to experience the exact same unfiltered, raw data output as everyone else. I spent the next 4 days meticulously planning the update patch. I contacted my company's aggressive, terrifyingly efficient corporate legal team. I paid a senior partner a ridiculous premium to draft a deeply ironclad, lethal cease and desist order, formally revoking Beatrice's access to my property, my person, and my wedding venue. Which brings us to tonight, Wednesday, March 25, 2026. The rehearsal dinner was being held in the sprawling, mahogany-paneled ballroom of the oldest, most exclusive country club in the state. The room was dripping in aggressive wealth. 60 of Beatrice's most influential, judgmental, gossiping friends were seated at heavy circular tables, sipping vintage champagne and eating seared scallops. Beatrice had paid $15,000 exclusively for the premium open bar. She spent the entire evening gliding between the tables in a sequined gown, soaking in the praise, casting smug, knowing glances in my direction, firmly believing that in less than 12 hours, I would be sobbing in a bridal suite while she played the hero. At 9 p.m., the lights in the ballroom gracefully dimmed. The waitstaff stopped pouring wine. It was time for the highly anticipated couple's journey slideshow. David stood next to me near the front of the room, holding my hand, his face flushed with happiness and expensive scotch. The massive projector hummed to life. For the first 2 minutes, it played exactly as expected. Beautiful photographs of our trips to Italy, our college graduation, our first apartment together, set to a soft, acoustic track. Beatrice sat directly in the front row, a flute of champagne pressed to her lips, practically vibrating with matriarchal pride. I reached into my pocket. My thumb hovered over the secondary remote control I had hard-synced to the AV system earlier that afternoon. I pressed the button. The acoustic music cut out with a harsh, violent electronic pop. The screen glitched, flashing bright blue for a fraction of a second, before instantly cutting to the raw, unedited 4K security footage from Maria's Tailor shop. The silence that slammed into the ballroom was absolute. It was a heavy, physical weight. I need this taken in by exactly 3 inches at the waist and the bust line. Beatrice's voice, amplified by the heavy acoustic subwoofers of the ballroom, tore through the elegant space like a chainsaw. Every single head in the room snapped toward the screen. I watched Beatrice's body physically lock up. The champagne flute froze halfway to her mouth. The blood completely drained from her face, leaving her looking like a heavily contoured ghost. David's hand tightened around mine so violently I nearly gasped. "What?" he whispered, his eyes wide, completely unable to process the data hitting his retinas. "Rebecca, what is this?" "I want her to look like a bursting sausage," the digital Beatrice hissed from the screen, the audio impeccably clear. "Make it so tight she has to apologize for her size in front of everyone. When she inevitably splits the zipper in the bridal suite, I will conveniently have a vintage, size 0 Vera 1 backup dress waiting for her." A collective, audible gasp rippled through the 60 guests. These were people who valued decorum and hidden passive-aggressiveness above all else. Hearing a plot this violently cruel, this explicitly malicious, laid bare in high-definition video was a social catastrophic event. Whispers immediately erupted at the back tables. Beatrice lunged out of her chair. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor, sending shards of crystal and expensive alcohol splashing onto her designer heels. "Turn it off," she screamed, her voice shrill, frantic, and entirely devoid of her usual polished control. "This is a deepfake. This is AI. She altered the video to frame me. Turn it off right now." I pressed the button again. The video paused on a massively zoomed-in, freeze-frame shot of Beatrice slamming the $1,000 bribe onto the cutting table, her face twisted into an ugly, sociopathic sneer. The screen instantly transitioned to a crisp, white PowerPoint slide titled, "New Feature feature implementation. I let go of David's hand. I walked slowly to the center of the room. I was wearing my rehearsal dinner dress, but more importantly, I looked absolutely radiant, entirely untouched by the stress she had tried to inflict upon me. I grabbed the wireless microphone from the podium. "It's not a deep fake, Beatrice," I stated, my voice dangerously calm, echoing off the high vaulted ceilings. "You just possess exceptionally terrible situational awareness. You walked into the exact shop of the artisan who spent 18 months building my dress. She kept your bribe, so do you very active QR code into the lining to warn me, and handed me the video file." Beatrice stood frozen, her chest heaving, her eyes darting frantically around the room, searching for a single friendly face. She found none. Her own friends were staring at her with expressions of pure, unadulterated disgust. David finally broke out of his paralysis. He stepped forward, his face a mask of absolute horror and betrayal. "Mom, you broke into our apartment? You tried to ruin her wedding dress? Are you completely insane?" "I was trying to help you, David," she wailed, tears of pure, desperate humiliation finally streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "She doesn't fit our image. She is entirely wrong for this family. I was trying to save you from a lifetime of embarrassment." "You just embarrassed yourself," David snarled, his voice dropping to a terrifying, quiet register I had never heard before. He didn't look at her with anger. He looked at her like she was a stranger. He turned his back to her completely, walking over to the podium to pick up my floral bouquet. I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer and pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. I stepped off the small stage, walking directly up to where Beatrice was standing in her puddle of spilled champagne. "You ungrateful little," Beatrice screamed, her hands shaking violently as I extended the envelope toward her chest. "This is a formal, legally binding cease and desist order," I said, my voice cutting through her hysterics. I shoved the envelope into her trembling hands. "It formally revokes your emergency key privileges, which the building concierge has already deactivated. It legally bans you from contacting me, and it serves as formal notice that you are permanently trespassed from the wedding venue tomorrow. If you attempt to show up, the off-duty police officers I hired with your $1,000 bribe will arrest you in front of the photographers." She looked down at the heavy legal document, entirely broken. I turned my back on her and addressed the dead silent room of 60 guests. "I would like to inform everyone that while Beatrice is no longer welcome to attend the ceremony or the reception tomorrow, her extraordinarily generous $15,000 donation to the premium open bar will absolutely still be honored," I announced smoothly. "Consider it a parting gift to the daughter-in-law she fundamentally failed to break." The room erupted into low, chaotic murmurs. Two of Beatrice's oldest friends physically turned their chairs away from her. Beatrice let out a pathetic, guttural sob. She clutched the cease and desist to her chest, turned on her heel, and practically sprinted toward the heavy oak exit doors of the ballroom, fleeing the absolute destruction of her social empire. As her hand hit the brass push bar of the door, I raised the microphone to my lips one final time. "Beatrice," I whispered into the mic, the sound perfectly catching her right as she pushed the door open. "I'm a UI designer. I know exactly how to fix a bad user experience. You've just been deleted from the final build." The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind her, echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. David walked over, handed me my bouquet, and kissed me on the forehead in front of everyone. "We are getting married tomorrow morning. I will be wearing a flawless, $5,000 custom silk masterpiece that fits me perfectly, while my mother-in-law spends the day sitting alone in her massive, empty house, permanently exiled from the family she tried so desperately to control. Am I the monster here, or did she get exactly what she deserved?"
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.